going like this with a trolley, you know, rocking the baby that I didn't even have with me because it was just second nature. And then looking at the people around me thinking, you don't know how lucky you are because you can sleep whenever you want to. I have to open the garage door. I have to get the bag. I have to get the child. Where's your shoe? No, stop eating your brother. You know, by the time I get in the car, I'm exhausted. But, you know, if you stay home the whole day, then they will exhaust you here. So pick your poison. The Lord. And she had quite a lot of hardship in her life. But she always managed to have such grace and be fascinated by lifestyle. I remember when it was Halley's Comet, she would get up in the middle of the night and go and stand on her balcony in Darling, this little small town, which was just above the liquor store. But she was still fascinated by life. And hello there, everybody. I'm Annelize Vermeulen from Annelize Art. Instagram handle Annelize_art. And we are just going to have a nice conversation now. I've always loved nature. I've always loved the shapes, the colors. I just find it fascinating the way the light changes. And ever since I had art as a subject at school, it was always one of my favorite subjects to draw.
And you also mentioned that you had to cycle. It was extra subjects. You had to cycle from.
Yes, that was quite the undertaking actually, because my high school didn't provide art as a subject at the school, so we had to take it at Tygerberg Art Centre, and we only had like half an hour to get there, and I lived about 10-minute cycle away, so I had to race there, and I did graphic printing art, so I had all these large wooden cutouts and everything that I had to balance, but somehow I made it. You know, if there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely. And if you can tell us a bit about your acting, the aesthetics that you did.
Oh yes, yeah, no. Ever since, like I said, I was a born performer. I always loved the audience. I was never shy. I was the one-trick pony who always had to perform for the whole family and sing and dance and all of that. And since primary school, I did. You recite all these poems and things, so that was my thing, and I always did very well. I think except one year, my sister's 4 years younger than me. She did a poem and then she got highest honors and I only got honors, and I was very, very upset about that. But then she lost interest, luckily, and then I got my full honors again.
And then if you can tell us a little bit about the monoprint.
The monoprints that I did.
The monoprints that you did, yeah.
Yes, like I said, when I was taking my subject art, it was graphic art, and it's printing. So it was very much drawing based. We did like woodcut paintings, like monoprints. We did silk screens. We did etching. So there was quite a number of different techniques, but there was a lot of detailed drawings involved, and that's what kind of drew me to that as well, because there was quite a variety of different types of art you could take. You could do textile design, you could do painting, but I went for the graphic monoprinting because of it being much more focused on the drawing itself.
And then after school, what did you actually go and study?
I did a Bachelor of Arts specializing in drama, and my bachelor's degree my majors were drama and psychology, because I've always been fascinated by people. I suppose that's the acting and the art of all of that is kind of just part of being fascinated by the human condition. And then I did my honors in film marketing. So I thought I should kind of put a bit of a commercial spin on it as well. Oh, with drama. Yeah, with drama, you know, I remember the first day. We went into the theatre, which was the HB Tom Theatre at that point. Now it's the Adam Small Theatre it's called now. And I went in there and I was kind of hoping to feel this magic. And I stood there and I was waiting for it and it didn't come. And I was like, that's interesting. So maybe that's not my main calling in life. Even though I suppose from all the art forms that I kind of enjoyed as a child and as a teenager, drama was the one that came the easiest. Kind of like other people had to prepare a lot, I could just kind of stand up and it just kind of flowed. But then I realized I don't just want to focus on that. And the people were very weird. I was brought up in a very conservative Christian home, and yeah, the morals did not really align with my ones. But also, I was still fascinated by the art form, and I remember my mother, who is, like I said, came from a small town, very conservative, and she said, and I was like, oh, Mum, I don't think this is the right course for me. These people have like feathers in their hair and they smoke marijuana, and I don't think I really fit in here. And she just said, you know what? Don't let them, let go of your dream just because they're different. And I thought, oh, that's quite profound, especially from somebody coming from her background. And I mean, we weren't rich. I had to study with a student loan and they had to pay the interest. So it was hardship for them actually to have me there and to have that opportunity. I will always really appreciate that. And then I thought, you know what? I still like the course. So I'll finish it, but I'm definitely not going to be an actress. I'm not going to be an actress full time. This is part of the journey. And for me, it was more kind of like, no, this is university of life. I made amazing friends that I'm still close to this day, that I made in my residence and on campus. And yes, it was a fantastic experience. It was the first time in my life that I was on my own, away from my parents and my sister, and I could just be myself. And the freedom that offered was just incredible. And, finding your way in life and deciding what you wanted to do. And I think what I realized is the fact that you study something and you get a degree doesn't mean that's it for life. That's just the start of it.
And you said that obviously the people was quite different than your upbringing. But what do you think changed in your mind from viewing other people from different cultures and different viewpoints, and did you learn anything from them?
Oh yes, a lot. Like, you can learn something from everybody, but it doesn't mean you have to let go of what you believe in. Since I was a little girl, I've always been close to the Lord. I gave my heart to Jesus when I was in grade 7. But before that, especially my grandmother on my mother's side, she was very grand by people. And I think that kind of cemented the thing that you have to know what's important to you. And you have to live that. You have to live an authentic life. But that doesn't mean that you can't relate to other people who are completely different to you and have completely different set of values. There's such richness everywhere. And, like the Lord said, everything works out for His purpose. In the end, He makes everything work. Everything can really work because He's in charge. So it was fascinating. It was really fascinating. It wasn't always easy because sometimes you were like, oh, really? You're so boring or whatever. Whereas in my circle of friends who were studying regular degrees like BComs and BScs, I was like the weird one. But then I was the weird one in the drama class because I was wearing my khaki short and my white t-shirt, and they came in kaftans and feathers and all of that. So, yeah. So it was kind of like, you know what, you have to be at ease with yourself. But you can still relate to everybody, and there's always something you can learn from everybody.
Absolutely. And then when you finished studies, you went to England.
Yeah, not directly after that. I first worked at the biggest short-term insurer in South Africa, Santam, for 4 years. So, like I said, I studied on a student loan. So, in that sense, I always had that sense of duty. I have to pay off my student loan before I can do anything. So it was kind of like, okay, fine. I suppose that's why with my honours degree, I decided to go more commercial so I can actually get a proper job in a sense and not just, what can I create? It was kind of always that thing at the back of my mind, I have to pay off this money. So, yeah, I think for like 6 months or 3 months, I was like a sales rep for some company. And then I got a proper job at Santam, which paid me a salary, and I got a medical aid and a pension and all of that things. But it was always like, when will this stop? This is so suffocating. Yeah, I was always like I said, I've always been like a free spirit. But then I knew I had to do this thing so I could pay off this loan. And after 2 years, the first 2 years, I started in the call center where people wanted to make amendments to their short-term policies phoned in. And especially when they were very angry, and you picked up the phone, you were Santam, and they were like really angry at you. So I learned a lot of skills there, de-escalating conflict and all of that. And then after 2 years, the company merged with Guardian and National, which was a very English company. So then we got the opportunity to apply for different jobs in the company. And that's how I got into the marketing side of things. So I started working for the marketing department, and yeah, by chance, the lady who was the editor at that point of the Santam Post, which was the internal magazine for the whole company countrywide, she left, and then I was the only one there who could fill in. So I became the editor of the Santam Post, and I learned amazing skills. All the people who worked with me were all ex-journalists from Die Burger. So they studied journalism, and I was always interested in writing as well. So that's how the copywriting side of my career kind of developed from there.
And then you started. Then you went to England, for
Yes.
Royal Bank of Scotland. It
Yes,
was your
yes,
next
yes.
chapter.
Yeah, like I said, after 4 years, I was really fed up with working in corporate anyway. And my boyfriend, who's my husband now, he always wanted to go to England. And I thought, oh, well, then you go to England. I don't want to just go to England because you're going to England. If I want to go to England, I have to go there for my own reasons. And then after 4 years, I was almost, my student loan was always paid off. And I thought, you know what, if it's not now, when am I ever going to do something like this? And at that point, the working holiday visas were only valid up until you were 27 years old. And I was turning 27 that year. And I thought, okay, well, it's now or never. And he got his, obviously he applied long before me, and then about a year after that I thought, oh, you know what, I'm just fed up with corporate, let's do it. Always wanted to travel, and you couldn't do it in rands, so if we earn pounds we can go and see Europe. So that was it. And then what was supposed to be a 2-year working holiday visa turned into 11 years and 2 children late. And then, like you said, at first, the first year or so, I was just doing odd jobs. I was temping as a PA and a secretary and whatever. But it was, from an artist's point of view, it was amazing because I met all these different people, and I were all in all these companies. But it was quite nice because you're a temp. You're not really part of the politics and things, but you can observe everything. And I met amazing people, and a lot of good material for writing a book later, maybe.
Awesome. Also mentioned that it was very important for you to be financially independent. So was that part of the reason why art at that stage of time wasn't a possibility?
It took a backseat, yes. Yeah. It took a backseat because, my parents had quite a thing with debt that kind of bogged them down. And I just made a vow to myself, I'm never going to be tied down with debt. So I didn't want debt. And for me, pursuing art as a profession was just too risky. I needed a salary to feel comfortable and that I could provide for myself and that I was independent. So even after Andre and I got married, we were in England for a year, and then we got married in South Africa, and then we went back. And then I got like a proper job at the Royal Bank of Scotland as a copywriter in the internal communication department at NatWest in London. And that was also like corporate all over again. But I just thought, no, I have to just stick it out because I need the income, Andre always earned much more than me because he's a software developer, but at least I got a decent, wage, and I could pay all the household, items I could pay for. He paid the rent and all the big stuff, but if I wanted to go and buy something, I didn't have to look him in the eye, I could do it. So that was quite important to me. And I think, like you said, because of that, I pushed art completely on the back burner. And it was as if this whole large part of myself I just kind of denied. And it kind of withered away in the background. And Andre used to buy me all these art materials and things over Christmas. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I would just put it somewhere in a cupboard. But then years later, I rediscovered it, luckily.
Would you say that during this time, because like you mentioned when you worked for Santam, it was Santam, eh?
Yes.
You mentioned that you did learn people skills, you did learn how to de-escalate situations,
Yes.
how to handle conflict. So would you think that some of this was things that you can portray in your art, or is lessons learned that's valuable?
I suppose so. I don't know if in my drawing that really comes to light. I think my drawing is kind of like my inner child just playing and just having a delight in nature type of thing. I think the people skills have always come quite naturally to me. My dad's very good with people as well, and my mum's got a very good feel for people as well. I think I grew up in an environment where people and relationships were always very important. Family has always been very important. And I think the Lord kind of made it clear that I could look at a situation and I could see different things that other people didn't necessarily pick up on. And I think with art, it's kind of like He's given me an eye for things that other people don't necessarily pick up on. So I suppose that kind of comes through in my art, or it comes through in my art that just looking at things a bit differently. I suppose those two can kind of complement each other, those type of skills. Working with people, de-escalating conflict is because you can see detail that other people can't necessarily see. And I think as a self-diagnosed ADHD person, I get distracted very easily because everything is loud and everything is something. And that means that you can get sensory overloaded a lot of the time. So I think as I've grown older, you can kind of drown out some noise, but you also realize that sometimes you just need quiet. And I think a lot of conflict that Andre and I have a lot of times is because I get to a place where I'm the belle of the ball at a party or a braai or something, and then I come and I'm like, don't talk to me. And he's like, why are you being so awful? And I'm like, you know what, this is my safe place, this is my home. I just need to recharge now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense, yeah. And then you mentioned that there was a credit crunch and retrenchment that you guys went through.
Yes, 2007/2008. The whole subprime mortgage market crashed down, and it had a whole ripple effect across the whole world. And obviously the investment banks and the banks in general got affected by that immensely. Like I've said before, I've always done contract work because I get bored easily. So this was my first real permanent job, was also at Royal Bank of Scotland, but it was at the investment banking side of things, whereas before I was in the retail section with NatWest. But it coincided with a credit crunch. So, and also I think what amplified the problems for Royal Bank of Scotland was the year before they merged with ABN AMRO, which was a bank from the Netherlands. And Sir Fred Goodman bought it at the top market rate. And then obviously when everything came crashing down, it was just too much, and it was hard to absorb that acquisition. And then with all the losses from the credit crunch, they were then forced to make a lot of redundancies. So what was supposed to be my first permanent job in the UK turned out to be my first retrenchment also. I was made redundant, as they say. And it's weird, when we had the chat about it before as well, people always say, it's not personal, but it's Well, it's damn right personal because they get rid of you and you are a person. So it's always like weird when I think back about it, when my manager, and it, oh, bless her, like the English would say, it was really hard for her because, I mean, she handpicked her team. And because I was the last one in, I was the first one out. So she said that whole weekend she had to let me go. And then there was another guy in the team who was the highest paid guy. And he came from ABN AMRO especially. And we were quite close actually as colleagues. She knew she was going to have to get rid of the two of us and have the HR conversation and all of that. And she said that whole weekend her husband was like, "What's wrong with you? You're in such a bad mood." And she said because it was all confidential, she couldn't even tell him about it. And yeah, I mean, I remember in the interview, I was very professional. Okay, fine, I understand it's not personal. And as soon as I left that room, I just burst out in tears because it's just awful. It's awful if somebody said, "We don't need you anymore." And yeah, that was also quite an interesting lesson to learn. It's not personal, but it is personal. And dealing with that rejection, which is not supposed to be personal, but it feels really personal. But in the end, I mean, I worked for 3 months there and then I got 3 months redundancy pay. So it was actually quite beneficial from a financial point of view. Then there, obviously, because of the credit crunch, it was hard to find a new job. So that was a couple of months that I kind of were looking and kind of out of a job. But because I was still getting paid the redundancy money, it was, it wasn't like that big of a challenge. And at that point, Andrea and I didn't have kids. I got pregnant in that time though, because we wanted to start a family. And I mean, it's just amazing if you look back now. In hindsight, isn't, like I say, it's an exact science. But at that point, because of the credit crunch, Andre also lost his job. And all of a sudden, both of us were like out of jobs. And we were on the cusp of getting our permanent residency in England. So it was like after all these years, although we never intended to go there to attain citizenship, we had this amazing opportunity. We were so close. We were literally like a few months or so away. And then luckily his workplace, who had to make him redundant because of finances, said, "Okay, fine, we'll keep you on as a contractor, just to have you on the books so that you still can have your work permit," because our whole residency was tied to Andre's work permit. So they helped him out and gave him work, but he had to travel to Reading every day, which was quite far from where we were living at that point in Surrey. At that point, we moved from London to Surrey. We spent the first 4 years in England, we spent in London. And then after we were kind of thinking, we wanted to start a family, we didn't want to have kids in London. So we moved to the country in Surrey, which was just outside of Zone 6 of London. So it was about an hour with a train to central London. But then Andre, like we always joked, he had to take the milk train to Reading, which literally stopped at every single station because that was the only route from our station to Reading. So it took him forever. So it was quite scenic, but it took forever. But, we just had to grin and bear it because we needed that work permit. And then all of a sudden, I got a job at Barclays Capital, but I think I was like 12 weeks pregnant, and if it's your first child, you don't really show that easily. But I told the people in the interview, by the by, because it was like a 6-month interview or a 6 months placement to do this Women's Initiative Network magazine. I am pregnant, but I would be able to finish the magazine. And I remember Caroline, the lady who hired me, she said, like, "Thanks for telling us, you didn't have to," but I think she really appreciated my honesty. And we had a very good working relationship. She gave me glowing reviews, later on when I needed references, even for work here in South Africa. My colleagues there said, "No, she gave you a glowing reference." Like, all I can say is, hire her. It was so sweet. Anyway, but in that time, so Andre was doing this Reading milk train journey every day, and I had to commute into London again. But then, as we were on the cusp of actually getting our permanent residency, one of Andre's previous colleagues from another job he had in London said, "No, you should come and work for us." but you were still tied to this work permit. So how it was working at that point, if you had a work permit and you were a foreigner, you were tied to that job with your work permit. You couldn't just leave and work at another company. But if you had permanent residency, you could work at whatever company of your choosing. So he said to Andre, come and work for us at Standard Bank. As soon as you get your permanent residency, phone me and then you come and work for us. And Andre's like, oh yeah, that'll be cool. And I remember we couldn't get an appointment in Croydon, which was the closest government agency where you can get an appointment to get your permanent residency, where you have to, present all your documents and all of that, and then they give you the permit. So the earliest appointment we could get was in Sheffield, which is way up north and like 2 or 3 hours drive. And me with my pregnant belly and all of that, we drove up there the day, and I think that was actually before I was working at Barclays Capital. That's right. I was out of a job, but Andre had the milk franchise, and we drove up. It was the Friday, and I remember after we got the documentation, Andre said to me, just text Alex to say we've got the documents. And I texted him thinking, okay, fine, he'll reply on Monday or whatever. Literally, it was 5 minutes. Alex's phone. He's like, stop at the nearest copy shop and scan it in and email the permit to me. Andre's starting his job on Monday. And everyone was like, oh, I thought I was going to have a few days off, but okay then. So it was literally the Lord just provided, And I think it was a few weeks after that I actually got the job at Barclays Capital. So it was just amazing how the Lord just provided. Every time we thought, because it could have gone either way, It was like all those years was like 7 years there. And the irony was, when Luca was born, he had his British passport before us, because we both had permanent residency, and then you had to wait I think another year before you could apply for your passport. But because we both had permanent residency, he got his passport first time. So when we went to a Schengen country, like we went to Berlin, Andre did a marathon there, the Berlin Marathon. Little infant Luca was traveling on his British passport, and we still had to have Schengen visas to get in. It was quite funny.
And you mentioned that during this time, when you did the chief and editor job for the Women Institute, that you started realizing that you're feeling more free, and you wanted to live for a purpose.
Yeah, I think it's like I said before, I've never enjoyed corporate environment per se. I find it quite restrictive because there's lots of rules and there are policies and procedures, and you can't just speak your mind. You have to, you have to play the game, you have to network. I remember it was very funny at one point. We went to a meeting to do an article or something, and then Caroline said, I'm just going to stay afterwards and network quickly. And I thought, you actually say that? For me, it would just be, I'm just going to have a chat with so-and-so, I'll see you later. Very formal, that's what it's like living underneath the flight path. We lived under the flight path in England as well. And I grew up in Barrow West under the flight path. But anyway, so planes never bothered me anyway. I'm the Elsa of planes. Anyway, and I always wanted to be a stand-up comedian, but now I'm sitting down. Anyway, so what I really enjoyed about Barclays Capital was, like I said, I don't like the rules and the rigid, just the rigidness of corporate. But what was nice about that job, I was basically sitting in a team that had nothing to do with me. I was doing my own thing. I was my own boss. Caroline would say, these are the articles you have to get written. These are the people you have to talk to. And I just organized everything. And she's like, oh no, the photographer cancelled. I'm like, oh, no problem. My husband's got an SLR camera. I'll do it. Monkey mode. There you go. You just need to be able to crop. And I really enjoyed the freedom of that. And because she trusted me, she saw that I could do it. So she was like, she just let me go. Whereas before, I always felt so micromanaged, and nobody wants to upset the bosses, So everybody tries to cover their own backside. So whenever you wrote a document, it would be 20 people giving their opinions. And now imagine track changes of 20 people on one document. It is an absolute mess, you know.
Imagine.
And then everybody is very happy, you know. Recently I wrote a blog about it. In the end, everybody is happy and you're saying nothing because nobody wants to read that Bible that you wrote. With all, you know, people, the client actually doesn't care about all those people, but there's so many egos involved. Oh, you have to put this line in and this line in. In the end, there's nothing left of what you're trying to say. And then you say everything, but you say nothing. And so what I enjoyed about the Women's Initiative Network newsletter was I just got free rein. I got the subjects, I got the people I had to talk to, I wrote it, got them to sign off, and it was one person, one or two people maximum that had to sign off an article. So it was like quick. And I could do my job, and you know, you had that sense of achievement quite quickly. Whereas, oh my goodness, in Royal Bank of Scotland, it went all around the merry-go-round. Oh no, I don't like that. You can't say this. Yeah, it was quite frustrating, and still I think with copywriting that's the main downside of it. If you have to please so many people, too many cooks, definitely it kills the broth, man.
You lose your originality.
Yes.
And then, but during this time, you also joined the Surrey College of Art.
Yes. That was after I lost my job, my first permanent job, which was not permanent at all. Irony. Then I decided, you know, since I'm getting paid and the job market is really hard to get back into, I signed up for a short course in painting and art at the Surrey College. Yeah. And that was the first time in a very long time that I kind of let Annelize the artist out again. You know, all those years of all the stuff that Andre gave me to draw with and all of that, and encouraged me, and I was like, yeah. And then I kind of packed it away. I kind of dusted off all those old things, and I never really painted. Like I said, I was drawn to graphic monoprints because of the detail and things. I never really felt the need to paint. But then I thought, you know what, I should try that. I've never tried it. So I did watercolor painting, and I did oil painting with all these ladies who had been on pension for quite a few years. I was like the youngest there. But we had a dynamic art teacher, and she was so passionate, and it really ignited the spark in me again. And every time I came back, you know, I went to the local art shop and bought some new paints and brushes, and it really kind of just lit that fire again that I kind of just put on the back burner for so long. You know, it's just amazing that if the Lord gives you a talent that He wants you to use it, He won't let you just leave it in a corner. You know, it's always there, and it just needs a little spark again.
But then unfortunately or fortunately, for the next 5 years there was motherhood again, which means that the art was sort of put
back on the back burner
again.
Yeah, it was a bit sidelined
again.
But yeah, that's one thing. You know, when I was talking about earlier about not feeling the magic in the theatre, part of that was I kind of looked around me. I've always been like a bigger picture kind of girl. Although I like detail, I like to put things in context. And I just thought, I looked at it and all these people were so like, oh, this is my art, this is my passion. Oh. Yeah, so it when I was kind of standing there in the theatre waiting for the magic that didn't happen, I had this realization, you know, if your craft is so important to you, and for these people it was, they were like rehearsing 24/7, they slept in the theatre, they were eating, drinking theatre. And like I said, I get so bored easily. I can't just focus on one thing. I need a multitude of things. I wanted to go wine tasting with my friends, and I wanted to learn about business and psychology, and I was immersed in resident life, you know, in my residence, and there were just so many things. I couldn't just focus on one thing. I found that very limiting. So, and there's one thing I always knew, even though I would not describe myself as a broody person, but I also always knew I wanted a family. I wanted children. I wanted a husband. that was just kind of like a given in my life. I just knew that the Lord has that in store for me. And I just kind of looked at it and I thought, how are you going to manage that if you're at the theatre 24/7? That's not going to work. So we were married for 7 years before we had children, and not because we struggled. It was just literally, there was a new job. There was always a new thing to do. Let's go skiing just one more time. And then I tore my cruciate ligament, which was a bit of a bummer because after the operation, I got a 9-month-old baby, but it was like rehab for my knee. So after I completed the rehab, I remember clearly the physiotherapist saying to me, "Now, mummy, go and get pregnant." And it was literally like when we decided we wanted to get pregnant the next month, whoa, we're pregnant. And I thought like, oh my goodness, I'm 34. This could take quite a while, but the Lord had other plans. So then we had lovely Luca, which was a blessing and a curse at that point for me because it destroyed any sense of self I had. Like any parent of a newborn would know. You don't sleep, you don't eat like you normally did. I remember walking through the supermarket and Andre was looking after Luca and I was like going like this with a trolley, rocking the baby that I didn't even have with me because it was just second nature. And then looking at the people around me thinking, you don't know how lucky you are because you can sleep whenever you want to. And thinking, is my life ever going to be normal again? Is this it now? It was like the Twilight Zone. Remember, it was just like this vague dream, fever dream, the first year of Luca's life because he slept so badly. And obviously then I was breastfeeding and not sleeping either. And I remember Andre saying Luca wasn't even a year old. Well, we might as well have another one because this one doesn't sleep. And I'm like, yeah, what the heck? I don't know what's up or down. Let's do it. And now in hindsight, I'm quite grateful we did because we got an intense few years and then, then it was done and dusted. But then came Felix and he was like, he slept and he was so chill. And I was like, then I was awake. Is he still breathing? Is he alive? Have I killed him? I haven't killed the first one. He was really difficult, hasn't it? This inner monologue never stopped. And like we were saying beforehand when we were talking, I think I definitely suffered from postnatal depression. Depression is quite prevalent in my whole family, on my dad's side especially. But because it was always my normal anxiety and things, I never realized that it could be different. I remember even as a child having these bouts of crying and being really depressed and all of that, but I didn't have the words really to describe it. I just thought, I suppose everybody goes through that. But being a hypersensitive person, I just assumed everybody probably feels like that. And now, being a grown-up, almost 50, now when you look back and studying psychology and all of that, you realize, and my dad had a lot of bouts of depression and things, you realize it's a genetic predisposition. And because I was so sleep deprived and I had suffered from depression before as well for numerous reasons, and having the genetic predisposition, you just kind of grin and bear it. And because I'm such an extrovert and I get so charged, I get like recharged by having interaction with people and being a performer. But like I said before, then I put so much energy into it, then when I get home, I'm like, and it was really hard for Andre because he said, you always give your best bits to other people. And like I said, I've said that before about my children as well. It's almost like a backhanded compliment. They are these perfect children at other people's houses and they get home and then you get the wolves and the monsters. But it's because that's your safe place. That's where people will always accept you. So it's this kind of backhanded compliment. So motherhood was intense for that first 5 years, and we spent it in England still. So there was no family support. My mother-in-law used to come and visit quite often, at least once or twice a year, and then she would stay for 6 weeks, and she was marvelous. She would just start the bath for the children, start a dinner, whatever, without prompting. And I remember every time she went home, I cried for a week because I had to do everything on my own again. But saying that, that was our decision. Nobody forced us to do that. That was something that we chose. And in a sense, we had a really special time with the children, and we got to know our children really well without interference. Because if you are with family, everybody's got an opinion, especially family. No, you have to do this. No, you know what you have to do. You have to do this. And we didn't want to know that. So, yeah, we just had to grin and bear it. And then we came back to South Africa after Andre and I spent 11 years there. Luca was 4 and Felix was 2. And he's still very upset that he can't remember anything about his life in the UK or abroad or New York that we visited or Canada. And Luca's like, Mama, do you remember this? So it's quite funny. But yeah, we came back, and like I said, for those 5 years, it was quite intense. There wasn't any capacity left within me to dedicate that to art. And then we came back, and it was hard. It was really hard to... The reverse culture shock coming back was hard.
Did you feel isolated in that time? And do you think that's possibly something that women need to communicate more often?
Oh.
Something that must come more often so that the mother don't feel so isolated, doesn't feel like something's wrong with her.
Yeah, that it's quite a common feeling isolated as a mother. Absolutely. I think so. I must, however, say I'm very grateful for the time we spent in England when I had the kids when they were very young, because the government actually had a lot of initiatives. They had a lot of play groups that were free that you could go to. Where I found in South Africa, the equivalent to that type of things were all, you have to pay for it. You have to go to a mummy and me group and you have to pay money and a membership or whatever. There, everybody could go to the baby groups. You know, they had like a early development childhood center, whatever. I think a lot of that has been cut back now, unfortunately, with the NHS struggling financially. But when we were there, the only thing we paid for was the National Childbirth Trust, the NCT. And that was marvelous as well, because it put you in touch with couples that were having children in a similar time frame. So we all had our babies. I had Luca first because he was a month early. So they were all sitting there with their baby bumps and complaining, oh, I just want to get this child out of me. And I was there with my child seat and hardly breathing because I was so sleepy. And I'm like, be careful what you wish for. But that gave me a sense of belonging. That was my saving grace, actually. But when I came back to South Africa and I had my toddlers with me, I felt very isolated because I didn't know anybody with small children at that point, because we had our children later than most of our friends in South Africa. Their children were all at school and I was still looking for a preschool for them. And it can be very isolating, and it's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Having small children is isolating because it's hard work. The smaller the child, to get out of the door, the bigger the bag is that you have to take with you. And it incrementally kind of shrinks as the child becomes bigger. But just to get out of the door, oh my goodness, it was just like the amount of emotional energy it took. It was just, it was hard. It was really hard. I remember there's a Michael McIntyre sketch that he does about getting out of the door before children. Hi love, shall we go out? Yes, let's go out. We open the door and there we go. With children. Where's my shoe? I don't know where my shoe is. Do you have a jumper? No, I don't have one. And then there's a big argument and everybody is sick of it, and maybe within half an hour you get out of the door and then maybe you don't even feel up to it anymore. So things, Andre and I have always been very spontaneous travelers, and all of a sudden that all changes. You know, I'm not really a planner. Naturally, I'm always late. My friends hate that about me. Luckily, I'm very charming, so that makes up for it. But I always think I can do more than I can within the time frame allotted to me. So I had to force myself with children because they have to be at school at a certain time. You know, you can't wing that. So that takes a lot of emotional energy as well. So I think in that sense, motherhood can even feel quite isolating in that sense when they become older, because there's so many emotional battery it takes to raise a child that's not really visible on face value. So Andre will come home and he'll say, "Oh, so what did you do today?" "No, I just sat here smelling farts, you know what it's like." But it's not like that. Even if it doesn't look like it, you have to plan, okay, now this day I have to be there, and so I can't pick them up, so I have to organize for somebody to do this and da. And it just kind of happens. But he doesn't see that. I mean, he goes out and he has to provide. So he has to do his day job, and that takes a lot of energy from him. But the stuff that happens here doesn't normally, I mean, I don't earn money for it, but if it doesn't happen, then it's a big fat poo pile, you know. But when it just happens, you just kind of, oh, well, that's just what you do, you know. But because I'm such a scatterbrain, it takes a lot of emotional energy for me just to kind of keep this facade up that everything is kind of working and organized. Because it doesn't come naturally to me at all. I am a free spirit and I want to draw and then I want to look at the clouds. But, oh no, they want to eat every day, every day.
And then during this time, you also struggled to get a school for Luca.
Yes, it was hard. Like I said, that reverse culture shock. Oh my goodness. I remember sitting on this very couch and sitting there feeling so sorry for myself because, you know, it's human nature. You kind of miss the stuff that you knew. So I knew how it worked in England. Even though it was hard, we were on our own. We didn't have family support. I had really good friends there, but I kind of know I knew how everything worked. I knew where to find tomato sauce in the supermarket. You know, it's silly things like that. I knew in which lane I have to be, as they say, the roundabout, you know, the circle or whatever. Or all of a sudden, I came back here. We bought Andre's mum's house, which was something familiar, but also now it's our house. We have to put in our furniture. We have to do things our way. So it's all new. I have to put the alarm on. I have to open the garage door. I have to get the bag. I have to get the child. Where's your shoe? No, stop eating your brother. You know, by the time I get in the car, I'm exhausted. But, you know, if you stay home the whole day, then they will exhaust you here. So pick your poison. It was really hard. I remember sitting here on this very couch and thinking, oh, I have to find a school for Luca, like a preschool, but where? I don't know preschools here. It was never part of my frame of reference when I was like in my 20s when I left. So Luca came running down the hall and he's like, Mommy, when am I going back to preschool? And I'm like, we haven't found a preschool yet. And he's like, I miss England. And I'm like, I miss England too. We sat here on the couch, he's on my lap, we're crying, and Felix is like, you know, filling his nappy. So it was just a hard time readjusting because things have changed. You know, all the people I knew had children twice the age of my little children, and you know, they've been through the schools and everything. And it was only after I did find a preschool for Luca that I got re-established in a community, because you come in and then you're apart because people go on without you. They don't need you. They don't wait for you, and neither should they. But they don't need you, so they're not going to come and seek you out. You have to put yourself out there and say, hey, you need me. I'm great. You know, I want to be part of your group. So it was only through the relationships and things that I established within that community again that I kind of felt part of the neighborhood again. Even though I knew the neighborhood quite well, people moved on, things changed. We went to Tiger Valley and they changed the whole shopping center. All the shops that I knew were like on different ends. The parking lot looked different. If you wanted to go up to the roof parking, you needed to take another lane. You know, it is weird. It's just the weirdest thing. It's familiar, but it's not. So it's just kind of making those switches in your brain, and it takes so much effort, you know. It's the mental load of it. It was just, the first 4 years were really, really hard. And then After 1 year, I stayed with the kids because I said to Anna, we just have to get them re-established and settled and all of that. And I was like, oh, time to get back to work. So got a really silly job in Weinberg with a company that I did not really share values with.
So at this stage, you felt like that you can return to normal, or not normal, but you've got some time for yourself, and then you started focusing on art again.
Yes. Luca was struggling a lot in mainstream primary school because he's dyslexic, so he couldn't read properly. He's extremely intelligent, and he was obviously aware of the fact that he wasn't actually progressing the same as his peers, which made him very frustrated. And he's also very sensitive, so he used to come out of school with his fingers in his ear saying, "Mummy, they're too loud, they're too loud." And then we just realized to kind of just get his self-esteem and things just back, we had to take him out of mainstream school, and we put him in a cottage school, which is kind of like you outsource your home schooling, because we would have killed each other. And then we put him on a waiting list for Jan Kriel School, which is a school for intelligent learners with learning difficulties who struggle in mainstream. They still do the CAPS curriculum, but they actually have a lot of extra resources, and they get people with they give them accommodations like this smaller classes, only 15 in a class. He gets accommodations like somebody will read his questions to him in an exam and will also write for him. So he just has to learn everything. And because he's an auditive, kinetic learner, he remembers things quite well, but he struggles to write and to read. So as soon as Luca got his place in Jan Kriel School, it was kind of like the whole family we just breathed out, because it affects the whole family if one child isn't happy. And he was very frustrated because, he just he wasn't in the right place for him. And as parents who've never dealt with something like that, or anybody for that matter, you don't really know. There's no recipe of what to do next. If the child doesn't fit into mainstream school, you have to kind of make it up as you go along. And that was quite hard. I mean, just putting him on Ritalin for his attention deficit disorder we had to kind of get our heads around it, because you don't want to medicate your child unnecessarily. But then we just realized we're actually making it harder for him. We're not helping him, because we've got a thing against medicating your child, but now he has to suffer. And if you can give him something that makes it a bit easier and actually gives him the opportunity to learn, because he had all these obstacles, he couldn't learn because he couldn't actually switch off everything that was happening around him. So when he got his space after 2 years at the cottage school, he got his place at Jan Kriel, and it was amazing. It was also, again, it was a change, because he was so happy in the cottage school, but there were only 10 kids there. So we knew that wasn't going to be a long-term solution. He needed to be amongst his peers. And then he got the place, and we went to the interview where they actually take you through the school, and they show you everything. And Luca didn't say a word. He was just kind of walking around. And Andre and I were like asking questions and so forth. And right at the end of the session, the lady who took us on the tour said, "So Luca, what do you think?" And he looked at her and he said, "Yes." And Andre and I just burst out laughing. He's like, "Yes, I want to be here." That was it. And we've never looked back since. Jan Kriel School changed Luca's life. It changed all of our lives. He's living his best life. He's thriving. He is really doing well at school. He's actually getting prizes for academics, which was never even on the horizon before. And he really got his voice. He got his group of friends, and he's really, really happy. And that kind of released me in an emotional sense. So about 2 years ago, I think, when everybody kind of felt settled, and as bad as it was for Luca in main school, so good it is for Felix. He just fits in that mold. He's a completely different child. and he's very happy in mainstream school. So as soon as everybody was kind of happy and, you know, settled, then I could focus on my art again. And then I think it started with Christmas cards again. It's like full circle moment. I thought, oh, I'm going to make Christmas cards again for everybody. So I made customized Christmas cards with each family member's name on, you know, and drew a picture which I thought would appeal to them. And that's how I got into drawing again. And I think my mother-in-law got a bouquet of flowers from my sister-in-law who lives with her family in Canada for her birthday or something. And it was just these beautiful, colorful blooms. And again, it was the flowers. The flowers spoke to me. And that was the first picture I drew about, I think, two years ago. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Then I won't say I always liked proteas, you know, as a fresh cut flower to put in my house, but just the shapes and the colors and all of that fascinated me, and I just started drawing a lot of proteas for some reason. Never intended to sell it or whatever, but every now and again I would draw pictures. Somebody said, "Oh, can I buy it?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I never really thought I was good, you know. It's kind of like I said with people, I just assumed everybody's like that, you know. It's one of those things. But then, yeah, the Lord kind of used my friends to tell me, you know, you've got an exceptional talent, and thanks for blessing us with that as well. And I just realized, wow, yeah, it never really went away. And with everything, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So if I look at stuff that I drew like 2 years ago and I compare it with what I draw now, you could see, wow, I've become better, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. Yeah, now it's just part of my therapy, in a sense, you know. If I'm really feeling stressed or whatever, and I go and sit there and I focus on my picture that I want to draw, yeah, it's like that. It's the gift of engagement, of absorption. You're just absorbed in this activity, and it just helps you to kind of process things if it feels too much. If there's just like sensory overload, sometimes I just need to go and I draw a picture, and then I feel calm again. Then I can face the challenge again. You know, just a bit of time out, and just a healthy way of kind of dealing with life, I suppose, as opposed to, you know, falling into addiction or whatever, trying to just self-medicate things that, yeah, which is the easiest thing to do. And I think, like many other families all over the world, I've got a lot of people who had struggled with addiction before, and I've always been very aware of that I don't want to fall into that trap. But it takes a lot of mental effort to not do that, because it's so easy to just self-medicate, you know, and it's an instantaneous, I'm feeling better, but then it becomes worse and worse. And because I've seen in my own life how people were affected, whole families were destroyed by it, it's a vow I made to myself, I'm not going to do that to my family. Yeah, so now that everybody's okay, yeah, I can play again. I can play again with my pictures.
And you mentioned that you like bold colors. Do you think there's a specific reason for it, or is that just like a style statement? That's just something that speaks to you, that just makes you excited?
I've always liked bold colors. Always liked primary colors. Red, blue, yellow, black, white, green. Just, I love it. I love bold colors. I'm not a wallflower. I'm a bold person. I think it's kind of, it just speaks for my personality as well. Yeah, and I just love it. I love it. If you don't make an excuse, you know, let people see you. Take up space. Don't be like, oh, excuse me, you know. No, I'm here. Take it or leave it. You know, I'm not for everybody, but that's okay. Yeah.
And then, how do you think art fits into your walk with God? When you're doing art, do you feel like He's talking to you in a way? Do you experience Him? Yeah, how does that affect your life, your walk with God?
God is in the details. God is in Yeah, I mean, like the scripture said, he wasn't in the thunder, he wasn't in the lightning, in the earthquakes. He's in the gentle breeze. You know, you have to get quiet to not miss his details. And I suppose that's what art is for me, getting quiet, going back to creation, because God is the greatest artist of them all. He made us, He made the world. Yeah, so God is a creator. And in each of us, we've got that little seed of creation in us. So it makes me feel close to God because He gave me that talent. It's not mine. So I have to give it back to Him, in a sense.
How do you think people find purpose in their lives?
Whew, that's a very personal thing. And I think it also is very closely related to your journey in life. Purpose isn't something that just necessarily jumps out at you and you just know it. Sometimes life takes you on a journey and the Lord reveals certain things at certain times. Where myself, I've always said to Andre as well, oh, I wish I knew I wanted to be a doctor. Like Andre's brother-in-law always knew from a very early age he wanted to be a doctor. And he did everything to get to that, to take that path. Even though there were obstacles, you know, he didn't get selected at first. He completed a whole BSc degree. He almost enrolled for his honors degree and then he got a space at medical school. But he knew that's what he wanted to do and that's what he worked towards. But as a creative person, I've never had this thing. Like I said, drama came easy to me. That's why I went on to study it, because I thought, like, music, oh, you have to know you can't make up notes if you can't read it. And I remember being petrified in my UNISA exams and like making a mistake, and then they always said, goed aan die gang gehou. Because I was like, I don't know what that is. But you can make up words, and if you do it with a lot of conviction, people actually believe you. I remember I was reciting a poem, I think it was in my final year at school, and there was so much going on. Like I said, I had like art 2 or 3 times a week where, you know, so there was, and I had extra other curricular things that I did, and tennis and whatever. So I was really busy and I didn't really have time to learn my words properly for this poem. But that never stopped me before. So I went on stage, and as I was standing there, I said this line, and then I thought, oops, can't remember the next one. And then I pregnant pause, and I repeated the line in 3 different ways. And then I looked at the audience again, and then I left the stage and everybody was clapping. And I remember my Afrikaans teacher afterwards told me, he said, it was like, I think we did it in conjunction with another high school, and the other teacher said to him, oh, that was an excellent piece of reciting. And my teacher said, yeah, it's just a shame it was just half of the poem. But I did it with such conviction that I even actually fooled this guy who was supposed to know the poem. But anyway, so you could do that. But maybe it was kind of like, I didn't want to struggle in a sense. I just wanted to do something that came easily, because there was a lot of other things personally in my life that involved lots of struggling and lots of challenges. So I thought, oh, just do something that comes naturally. And then, yeah, I realized that I don't just want to do that. So I can't even remember what was your initial question.
So how do you find purpose in your life?
Yeah, so purpose, I think sometimes the Lord reveals it in increments. So for me, I think my purpose in life is to use my creative talents to uplift other people. That's what I think. I think that's my purpose in life. And that comes in different shapes and forms. It's not necessarily just with a job or whatever, but whatever my interaction is with a person. I need to be the Lord's vessel so He can use my creative talents to uplift that person. In what form that takes, that's the Lord's choice. But That's why I am here. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I thought I had to be a profession. And I felt very inferior in comparison to many of my friends and my peers, because they were a something, a nurse, a doctor, an accountant. But I was never a what am I? And then I realized, yeah, you're a creative person, and you've got an eye for detail, and you see things that other people don't see because the Lord entrusted you with that gift. And it's not common. That's why you will feel alone sometimes, because not everybody will understand that. But that's because God gave you a special gift that He entrusted to you, and that's actually a privilege.
And then that, I think, also ties in nicely where you mentioned that you want to share joy with your drawings.
Yes. You know what? The people that I've found the most inspirational in life, they make it look so easy. But it's not necessarily people who had it easy. It's people sometimes who had to suffer a lot of hardship to actually realize what is important in life, and the simple joys of the creation of a flower. I mean, with all the AI and whatever, we can't create flowers like that. But the Lord designed every little petal and every fraction of light that hits it, It's just extraordinary. And I remember when I said to Andre, I want to draw flowers, and he's like, nah, everybody draws flowers, nothing new about that. And I thought, I want to draw flowers. That's what I want to do. And I just started doing it. And it spoke to people. And sometimes I see something else and I draw it. There've been like an instance where a friend of mine, she went to Paris and she met up with a friend, and they took this gorgeous picture. A friend took this gorgeous picture of the Eiffel Tower, and it was in springtime. So the sky was quite cloudy. It was like a greyish sky with the Eiffel Tower against it. And in the front were these gorgeous, bold coloured blooms. And it made such a statement. And one Friday evening I was sitting here and I'm like, oh, I'm going to draw this picture. And I drew the picture and I sent it to her. It's like, oh, look, I drew the picture. And she's like, oh. And she lives, in the countryside. And she's like, oh, I'm coming to Cape Town tomorrow. Can I buy it from you? And I'm like, wow. But just that joy, because nowadays with smartphones and things, everybody can take pictures. There's nothing unique about it. But actually sometimes just drawing a little slice of life just makes it more special.
Absolutely. You also seem to enjoy drawing lighthouses, and I think that also ties in nicely where you want to let people shine their light.
Oh yes, I think what I was saying earlier about my purpose is like making other people shine, using the gifts that God made me to let other people shine, because it's not about ourselves. I think if we focus so much, and we all do that, don't we? You have to go there. As you get older, you realize, the more you want things for yourself, the more lonely it gets, because if you can't share it, what's the point? Yes, like lighthouses. Yeah, shining light. I think the realization of God entrusting me with special creative gifts to let other people shine, it enables them. And that's your purpose. It's amazing if you actually realize that your purpose is outside of yourself. It's for the greater good. It's for the whole body of Christ. It's not just for you. If you just put all your energy in one finger, what about the rest of your body? It's going to die. You can't just live with one finger. But if everybody gets the oxygen and the blood and all of that they need, there's so much more to be done and to be enjoyed, and there's always joy, There's always joy in the midst of the darkness, Viktor Frankl says in his book, The Road Less Traveled, no, it's not, that's in Scott Peck, but Viktor Frankl's book about when he spent time in Auschwitz, where he said, if you know why you do something, you can almost endure anyhow. And he had that thing, he wanted to publish his thesis, he was a psychiatrist. And that kept him going. And also, he wanted to see his family again. And even though lots of people died, there was actually still family members left. But if you know why you do something, and it's like with joy, if you want joy for yourself, and you spend all your energy to get it, you're alone. If you don't share it, it's kind of like, give it away and we'll come back to you. Yeah, in lighthouses, I think we've spent many lovely weekends and a few holidays in Agulhas with that beautiful lighthouse, and I've drew quite a few pictures of that, and it's just that light, just let there be light, use your light and pass it on to other people so they can light up as well. Let your light shine.